Welcome to the J&J Show. I'm Jeff, he's Jerry, and tonight we are going to discuss a video that Jerry actually shared on Facebook that I saw, and it's really something. I tell you, it's this guy who's talking about how he died and went to hell. And his description, I was just telling Jerry right before we came on, is the most graphic description, the worst possible, not worse in a way that he describes it badly, but just the way he describes it is the worst description of hell I've ever heard. And it's very graphic. It's it's something in it, Jerry.
Oh yeah.
But there are things about this video, and I told Jerry to do this, that I've got 5 post-it notes just completely full of things that I wanted to talk about, because there are so many things about this video that stick out to me, and just 5 different things I have starred here that really, when I heard it, it just one of those things where it just gets your attention, and you kind of look at the speaker and you're like, really, So we're gonna get into all that now, but this is just another example of hell is real, and it's a real place. I know a lot of people. I've seen this in comments on social media where people say hell isn't an actual place; it's just an absence of God. Well, they're right in the aspect that it is the absence of God, but it is an actual place. But it was not meant for humans. It was not meant for us. It was meant for Lucifer and the enemy. Anybody, his army who follows him, is meant as a prison for them. But God also gave us the choice. You can choose God and you can choose heaven, or you don't choose God, and the alternative of that is hell, and it is your choice. Because I always hear this argument too, and I wanted to get this out of the way early. What kind of loving God will send people to hell? God doesn't send you to hell. You send yourself to hell by not choosing God. And we can debate that all day long, but that's just a simple fact. God does not want to send you to hell. I've heard in so many of these stories how people, sometimes these visions, these dreams, these experiences, near-death experiences, they start off with the person standing in front of God, and they describe the sorrow on God's face and in his eyes and in his voice when he sends them to hell. It pains him to do so, and he doesn't want you to go there. That's why he gives you every opportunity and every chance to choose him, to choose Jesus, choose him through Jesus. But I know I'm digressing a bit here, but I just wanted to get that out of the way early, because that's one of the major points I wanted to make. And I'll turn it over to you now, Jerry.
Well, I mean, it's just that, this is not the first time we've touched on this subject. I think it's the most important subject that we hit on. I mean, we're kind of a laid back channel. We just kind of get on and discuss things, and we discuss cryptids, and we discuss, faith and whatnot. But I think that this is far and away the most important subject that we hit on, because it's real. We have heard this type of testimony from at least half a dozen individuals who have all described the same thing, even though none of these individuals know each other. For me, it's what's the nail in the coffin is that these descriptions also line up with what the Bible tells us. Now, apparently, there's a big industry of describing near-death experiences out there, and everybody's doing that now, and they talk about bright lights and positive feelings and this, that, and the other. There's a lot of deception that's going on out there. There's a lot of things that people are experiencing that is straight up deception to make people believe that when you die, if you're a nice person, that you could go to some bright place where the environment is pristine, and that there's good feelings and good vibes, and that everyone's going to go there except for Hitler and maybe a couple of other bad people. This is the standard mantra that we've heard all growing up, but the Bible makes it very clear that's not the case in the least. But clearly what we're seeing on this end with these individuals, all of whom are extremely credible, is a picture that this guy lays out, like you said, very well. All of them have been really good, but this is the most recent. The gentleman's name is Dominic Morrow, and I'll let you lay out a little bit more of the background. What's nice, I'm sure we'll be able to put the video in the link so people can go and see it on their own.
Absolutely, yep.
He does not do a whole lot of background. He basically is does jump straight into it, the story, but it's very intense. And there's a lot of, I only have one post-it note, but there's so much in there. And I think it's interesting that not only does he describe hell, which is, again, is all these people agree, just to cut right to the chase, that these experiences, where they go, is not less real than planet Earth. Although he actually points out that he never leaves planet Earth, that what he experiences was in the center of Earth, which the Bible also says. But he said everything is more real. Reality increases, it doesn't decrease because it's a spiritual experience. And so you have to look at everything that goes on in that context, that time stops, reality increases. And I'll just hand it back to you so you can just kind of give, if you want to start us off, because once we start on this, I think it's going to go pretty quick because there's a lot to say.
Might even need to do two parts because
Right.
yeah, there's a lot to discuss here. But basically, I'm sorry, Dominic. What was his last name?
Morrow.
Moro. He was a gang member from a young age. I think he said as early as like 15.
Yeah.
He joined a gang and he was good at it. He quickly started rising amongst the ranks and he made some enemies within his own gang. And one day he noticed this guy standing outside of a store he and his friends came out of, and they didn't think anything of it. It's just one time. And then he came out of his apartment. That guy's there again. And, the first time he saw the guy, he seemed to be watching him and they thought it was kind of strange. So this time he sees this guy. Might have been the third time he saw him, but I'm pretty sure it was just the second. But, he remembered seeing him outside the store and how bizarre it was. And even his friends noticed and were little sketched out by this guy. And they he had even heard rumors that people were from within his own gang were gunning for him. So anyway, he comes out of his apartment. This guy's standing there, and he's going up, and he says, "Hey, who are you?" And about that time, the guy shoots him, and he remembers this, and he says he remembers after he was shot, it happened in an instant. He was falling, and he was falling into hell. And he says that the one thing he says that I see in all of these descriptions of hell is how empty he felt, how devoid of hope, how alone he was, and the fear that he felt. And also, there's the factor of, I think I got it somewhere else in here, but the heat that he feels there, and those are things that I see in every single one of these videos, and it just adds credibility to me. But he says he's completely devoid of God, and he just, because he talks about how here on earth you feel hope. Like he's like, even when he was in jail, he had hope because he had that release day coming up, and he knew that once he got out, he could change things, he could do better, and he could avoid going back to jail. But he says when it's here, when you're in hell, when you die, it is permanent and it is eternal. He says that we can't even understand forever, understand eternity, understand time without end until we can't comprehend it here on earth. But he says once you're there, you know it, and you know it in an instant. And I would much rather experience that in heaven than to be devoid of all hope in hell. And he said also as he was falling, all the moments in his life became clear to him when God was using people to try to reach him.
Right.
And when God was trying to reach him through these people, every single one of these things played out in his head, and he's just sitting there going, "Oh, that was and then he got the what he calls the shoulda, woulda, coulda,
Mm-hmm.
and just to have that regret. He says regret a lot, and he talks about the hate down there, and I'll get to that in a minute. But he talks about the emptiness. He talks about it, the complete absence of God, the complete absence of hope, and the complete regret that he felt because he knew he was stuck there forever. He knew it as soon as he died and he was falling. He knew he was stuck forever, that he had made his choice. That's why I wanted to make that point right off the bat, that you choose. You choose. And he said, and he even says, and this is one of the things I think that he stuck out to me. he knew he deserved to be there
Right.
because of
He
the
did say that.
choices. Because of the
Right.
choices that he made in his life, he knew that he deserved to be there. So I'm marking these things off as I go, so I don't so I don't repeat myself. But that stuck out to me because I've heard in some of these videos where people are cursing God and blaming God and stuff, but he says that he knew that his life, the choices he made in his life and what he did, he deserved to be in hell for that. So I think there's this, and he describes everything as spiritual, everything as you understand all of it in an instant. He understood because he saw how God was trying to reach out to him through various people, and he ignored them and he continued down this path, and that's where it got him. And that's the point I wanted to stress the most is like you choose. It's the path that you walk in life, and I'll turn it over to you here in a second. But that's just that to me. He knew he deserved to be there. Well, actually, there's one more point I wanted to make, and then I'll turn it over to you. But when he gets there, he describes the hate of the demons and the creatures there, and we'll get into the description of the creatures here in a minute because it really reminded me of cryptids, some of the cryptids out there. But the hate he says, and this is another word he uses a lot, ancient. That hate felt ancient, and a lot of the things he describes here, and we'll get to those over the course of the video, but he describes them as ancient, and he says that they hate us more than we could possibly imagine. And that's another thing that really stood out to me is how much he described how much these things hate us, just the pure raw hatred, and they feed off of it, and they torment us so our negative emotions can feed on them, and they just we can't even fathom how much they hate us.
And I was going to wait till later to mention this, but that's a perfect segue because where else have we heard that before, where somebody sees something and they report that they could see the abject hatred in its face and in its eyes, but with cryptids? And so much of what this guy talks about links in with what we've described on here with people and their experiences with cryptids, and how we believe that these cryptids, they probably come in and out of that dimension. We don't know how exactly this works, but he talks about their eyes glowing amber or red, which is reported all the time with cryptids. He talks about the smell. He said the smell in that place, if you were to smell it for even an instant here, that you would die from it. It was that bad. The smell was that putrid. People routinely describe they cannot describe how putrid these cryptids smell. And more than anything, he talks in here, he goes into great detail about these creatures that are down there. He refers to them as demons, which is fine. I think technically they're probably out even beyond that definition of demons. We don't know where some of these things came from. We just know they exist down there. But he describes creatures that are almost like a hybrid. How many times have we heard with these cryptids where they seem to enjoy or they get a positive reaction? They desire to instill fear. We hear over and over and over and over that they do things with the simple objective of causing fear. They seem to love, they need to cause fear in people. And we can connect that to what he's describing here, because all these creatures, these entities, whether they're in hell or whether they're here on earth, they're all in the same camp. And we need to realize that. We've been trying to make that connection for a long time. Things like this, I think, really go. Now, it's not to say that everything he describes has been described here on earth, because some of the things that he mentions down there are beyond what we've ever had reported. I do think that the size, he describes giants, he describes tiny, small, demonic things. You have that with cryptids, all sizes. So I think that there's a lot here when you listen to this and listen to what he's talking about, and he never makes the connection because most people don't know about cryptids and what's going on. But clearly, for me, I'm at this point, I've accepted that that's what we're dealing with, whether it's here on Earth or whether it's in the center of the Earth. The fact that they're interdimensional. He talks about this place being another dimension in the center of the Earth. He said he's sucked into. I thought it was interesting when he comes out of this place. He is. It's like he sucks. It's like he slaps down into this dimension, and he talks about even feeling his body like he's wearing his body, which he said was a strange sensation. Um, so there's you basically hit all the hopelessness is one that everybody says. Remember the one lady, the Tamara LaRue, said she didn't feel hopelessness, she became hopelessness. The realization that, and of course, this guy talks about something that the Bill Weiss talked about, that because he's attacked by one of these creatures, just like Bill Weiss was, and he's thrown by it. It grabs his head and throws him. And he says, when you feel pain down there, it's your entire body. He said, you can take a blow to the head, you feel it, and you feel it so much more magnified than you do, in a natural body. You feel it all over. The pain is excruciating. So there's so many things that he talks about that really line up with the others. But you really have to listen to this in its entirety. He's a very good speaker. He jumps right into his story. He doesn't give a 45-minute background on, growing up on a farm or growing up in the city. He pretty much jumps right into it. It seems at first like he might be going to launch into a big background, but then he just cuts right to the chase. So it's a good video to listen to.
Yeah, I always enjoy videos where they get right to it. I can't stand it when you see a headline and you want to hear what they're going to say, and then they talk for 30 minutes about conjecture. But
Right.
going back to the cryptid similarities, the way he describes them as looking reptilian, people always seem there are many stories where people see reptilian humanoid type creatures, cryptids out there. Actually, there's a famous one in South Carolina. But he describes them as being like the giant ones, giant reptilians, and the small ones. He says look like gremlin. He says they can't even come close. Hollywood can't even come close. What they do in Hollywood, how they try to portray demons and monsters and stuff, can't
Right.
even come close to what they really look like down there. And the little ones, he said he says that some of the stuff, I think he said that the little ones look like gremlins, and he said that he he said that some of them may have seen some of this stuff, and they because some like the gremlins look just like the little small ones.
Right.
So, I mean, it makes sense given the state of Hollywood and what you hear coming out of there these days. But he says that they looked bear-like and gorilla-like. Now, what cryptid does that remind you
Right.
of? Bigfoot. Uh, and then the fear thing, Dogman. Stupid
Yes,
name.
definitely.
Stupid name for a cryptid, but they seem to get off on instilling fear in people. It's like their main motivation is to instill fear, and they feed off of it, and that's what he talks about. How these
Yes. Yes.
creatures feed off of negative emotions. They feed off the fear. They feed off. He says anger is their favorite, and they love to get in there and disrupt people and their families and their relationships and stuff to cause these negative feelings so they can feed off of it. But he said anger is the number one thing that they try to elicit in people because they feed off of that one the most. That's their favorite one. And he also, this is another thing that stuck out to me about this video is that he says that the giant ones are fully intact. They look humanoid. They have 2 arms, 2 legs, but the rest of them are deformed. And he says the way they move, because of how deformed they are, looks like how the trendy dances of today. They move like how people dance today. That's another thing that stuck out to me. And then once I heard that, because I listened to this about a week or so ago, the first time whenever you posted it, and I started watching how people dance, and you can kind of see it. You start to see it once it's been pointed out to you. It's kind of hard to miss. So now when I see people dancing, I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And he says that one of them looked like it was moonwalking like Michael Jackson because its torso was inverted, legs facing one way, torso facing the other, and the way it had to move, it looked like it was moonwalking like Michael Jackson. And that's the example he gave. But he says, and I'm sitting there picturing all these trendy Fortnite dances that they do and that they put into that game that the kids are always trying to emulate and copy, and just all the stuff like that it makes sense. It makes total sense now why these dances look like they do, and you just see them And it's like, why do you want to do that? But now it makes perfect total sense. Now I do want to mention I'm not trying to say that all Fortnite dances are demonic. They might all be ridiculous in my opinion, but I'm not trying to say that they're all demonic. I guess I'm just a little older and I just don't get it anymore. But uh, yeah, I'm not trying to be like the town on Footloose doesn't allow dancing or anything like that. Let the kids dance. I'm not trying to say they're all demonic or anything. But Jerry, you had mentioned that he got grabbed and thrown while he was there, and by one of the giant demons. He says they grabbed him, I think, by the head and threw him into the side of a mountain. And this is part really caught me too, because there were a lot of cells on the side of that mountain that had people in them. And he said that these people were ancient, that they were biblical, from biblical times. And he even said that they had been there so long that they had started to decay and deform, and they even started to look reptilian themselves,
That's
which
right.
uh, it's hard to imagine. You read through the Bible, you read through the Old Testament, it's hard to imagine how ancient that book really is, how ancient of times that we're really talking about here. And these people have been there since those times, thousands and thousands of years. So it's really crazy to think about. And he says that they were the witches, warlocks, baby sacrificers, Baal worshippers, psychics, mediums, and Wiccans. And he mentioned some other things too, but he said as far as the Wiccans went, like people who worship the elements and they follow the elemental type deals and stuff like that. But the main thing that he said that I wanted to point out here in this episode is that they were all there. All these people, all these ancient biblical people from cells, all the witches and the warlocks and the Baal worshippers and so on, they were all there because they led others astray. He compared it to like a cult leader, which I mean, it's not that different at all. But they were there because they led others astray. And I believe we've talked about this before, about being careful what you put out into the world and what you put on social media, because one thing could really affect how somebody sees God. And we need to use every opportunity we can to reach the lost. They could have deliberately been leading people away from God, or not. But the point I'm trying to make is, whether you're deliberate or not, and what you put out there that may sway somebody from having a relationship with the Lord or getting to know the Lord, He's going to hold you accountable for that. And I've heard this in other dreams too, where people are one specifically comes to mind where the person involved, I forget who exactly it was, but they were waiting in line, and God was talking to each person one by one who was there, and one person was cast into hell, not because so much, I mean, he didn't have a relationship with God, of course, but also because of how he impacted other people, how he puts things out there in the world that turn people away from God. And that's what these people were there for, on the sides of in the cells on the sides of these mountains. They deliberately or not turn people away from God. And he held them accountable for it. He's going to hold all of us accountable for that. So we have to be very careful what we put out into the world.
Oh yeah. You think about the verse where it talks about it'd be better to have a millstone tied around a person's neck and have them be thrown into the ocean than to be the cause of a child or any child of the Lord stumbling or falling away from Him. It says that you'd be better off to not even be born than to cause somebody to stumble or fall away from the Lord. So there's definitely, like you said, these people are going to hell because they don't have a relationship. But once they're there, they're being punished for what their sin was and what they did. We, of course, don't have to be punished for what we've done, even though we've done wrong things, because the blood of Jesus washes that away. But if you don't have that, once you get there, he's like you said, he made it clear that people were divided up into certain areas, and people who were murderers were in a certain area. At one point, he talked about one of the giants took a giant stick, a long pole, a pike, and impaled 5 or 6 humans on this thing. And just like you would impale people don't realize, but impaling during the Middle Ages, like with what people think of as Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, the way they did that was the pole went in the rear end and worked its way out through the mouth. And that's basically what he said this thing did, was he impaled these 5 people on one pole, threw it over his shoulder, and walked off into the darkness with it. And it's just he talked about unbelievable horror that he saw, that people were, a lot of these eyewitness testimonies have mentioned the torture that they witnessed going on. This guy also said that he saw there were a lot of these creatures, a lot of these beings down there were getting joy out of dismembering people. He said that he saw sexual torture being done that he could not even describe because it would get erased censored off of YouTube. But he said it was just whatever your most wild imagination could come up with, it was worse than that. And these people were going through it. And he said a lot of them didn't even really resemble humans so much anymore, more like zombies, what you see in zombie movies. But yet it was, he said it was just unbelievable. And we've heard this now from numerous people, not just one. And these are credible people, and they're not making money off of this. Their whole purpose is to warn everybody. And that's why the Lord allows these experiences to occur, is to warn everybody, this is what's waiting. And if you continue to reject the Lord's outstretched hand, it's going to be your end. And it's not his fault. It's not anybody else's fault if you've rejected him. And a lot of these people, we've heard that the Lord will at times has even made clear that he's reached out to these people that are in hell. We talked about the one visitation that the lady had where she was in hell. And unlike this guy we're talking about, she was sent there by the Lord more as a witness, more as an observer. She still got post-traumatic stress disorder from it, just like this guy. All the people get post-traumatic stress. Psychologically and emotionally, they're really messed up from going through this experience, which is further testimony to its reality. But this lady said that the people that were down there, some of them were cursing God, others were saying why, and he always said, did I not come to you in the middle of the night and wake you and try to call you? Did I not send people to try to talk you into having a relationship with me, and you would never have it? So it's clear that he's reaching out to people. They're not just being sent down there because they don't know.
Exactly. Right. And that goes back to what he was saying earlier about, or what we talked about earlier, that he said that you see it as he was falling, or I think it was as he was falling, he saw all the opportunities he had that where God had sent him the people. And he talks about the shoulda, woulda, coulda of it all. And just like, and to that point, he said that there were people there. He said, this is really, it was kind of hard to understand, but not really at the same time. He was talking about how he could hear everybody screaming all as a group.
Exactly.
He could hear them all screaming as a group, but then he could hear each individual voice. So it was like this is the analogy he uses. It was like a stadium at a baseball game and everybody's yelling. But here on Earth, when you hear that, you don't hear distinguishable voices. It's all just one loud noise. But he could hear each individual voice of everybody in hell yelling. And he says that they were asking for just 30 seconds with God, that they just wanted to say sorry, that they regretted their opportunities and they just wanted another chance. And, by then it's too late. It's too late. You had every opportunity on Earth. And it's not that I don't have sympathy for these people. I hear these videos. It upsets me. This one especially. This is the worst one I've heard. I think this is the worst one I've ever heard. And just to imagine that they're already there going through that. And more people that are lost on Earth are going to have to go through that. And it's just, it really pains me to think. I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy. It's just unfathomable to think about the horrors and atrocities that he described. And the thing about this video, I know I'm laughing, it's funny in a non-funny way. He wasn't even through the gates of hell yet.
Right.
this is all outside the gates of hell because he describes a voice telling him to look up at one point, and he saw these rotten, ancient, decrepit gates that were once they looked once looked beautiful. They had like uh, jewels in them that were all dim and lost their luster, and most of them had fallen out. And but back to your point about the different sections for different people, he says that hell is highly organized, that every single demon down there has a job, and that they don't do it because they have loyalty for Satan. They do it because if they don't do it, they're going to get punished the same way. So they do it out of fear. And he says that there are specific sections for specific sins, which you kind of got into a minute back there. Just some of the things he described, like the human shish kebab is what he called it, when that demon impaled those five men and carried them off, and what was happening to that poor young lady. The
No,
that I'm not going to repeat that here. We will be
no.
putting a link to the video below if you want to go listen to it yourself, but I don't want to talk about that. But he did say, and this is another thing that caught me, that, and I think we've kind of touched on this before on this channel, and I think God makes it pretty obvious to us that murder down there in the afterlife, no sin is different than the other. He says that a murderer was no different than a thief down there. They were all, no one sin held more weight than another in God's eyes. You sin, you sin. The wages of sin is death. It doesn't matter what sin. And we've seen biblical figures throughout history. David, for one, adultery, sent a man to be killed. Moses murdered a man. And God forgave them, and He used them, and they are some of the most famous two of the most famous biblical figures in history, and they did these things, but they were forgiven because they walked with the Lord. Of course, back in the Old Testament, they had to make sacrifices, and David lost his child, and you had to repent and make sacrifices. But now it's easier than ever. You just repent, you accept Jesus into your heart, you accept Him as your Lord and Savior, and He paid the price. You don't have to pay the price. You don't have to do anything but accept Him as your Lord and Savior, and you're saved. But if not, this is what's waiting. I can't do it any justice. I feel like he does a lot better at it than I ever could, because he was there and went through it. But it's something I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy.
Yeah, he's that gate you mentioned. He's standing there looking at that gate when he feels a hand touch his shoulder, and he knew it was the Lord's hand. And he goes into great detail describing the touch and how it had ultimate authority, and it had ultimate love, and it was just unbelievably great that he felt that. And the next thing he knew, he was waking up in the and I'm kind of like you, I'm laughing, but it's not because I'm thinking it's funny. It's just unbelievable. It's he wakes up in the operating room. They finished up with the operation from him being shot, and a woman turns and sees him, and then he starts freaking out. He says he can still see, he can still smell the place. The smell was so bad, he could still smell it. And I think he says he could smell it for a while after that. He said he felt like his body, when he returned to his body, it felt like wet clothes that he had put on. And that was his body being back, encasing his soul. And he was terrified, he said, absolutely terrified to close his eyes. He couldn't go to sleep because he was convinced if he did that he would somehow go back there, and he was desperate to not go back there. And so he had a hard time even going to sleep. And of course he had nightmares, and it took him, and he even said at first he wasn't even exactly sure what had happened. It wasn't like he woke up and said, "Oh, I've just been to hell." It took him a little bit to kind of piece together everything and understand it. And so it was, that's how and then now his goal is just to get the word out. He said that's it. It's his whole purpose is to try to get and warn people. And that's what all these people say. They're driven by a desire to try to warn people as fervently, almost like somebody with a lantern that knows a bridge is out behind them on a rainy night, and they have the lantern and they're waving cars, but don't go, don't stop, and the cars are going around them, and they know they're going to go off the bridge into the river below, and yet people still don't listen. And so these people have that desperation. You can hear it in this guy's voice. You can tell he's not satisfied with his ability to describe, although he does a very good job of describing it. I think he does an outstanding job, but you can tell that he wishes he
Amazing.
could,
Yeah.
yeah, he wishes he could portray it even more. And so we highly recommend that people watch this, because he can do it far more justice. We're just hoping by doing this that we can point more people to watch his video.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to listen to, but you can see it. Like you said, you can see it on his face when he's talking about it. Just the seriousness of it and the gravity that he portrays. And yeah, like you say, he doesn't think he did a good job. I found it very hard to listen to. Some parts, just trying to get through it because it was just so bad, and I just couldn't imagine that. When you listen to somebody's story, you try to put yourself into their shoes while they're talking, and this guy does a good job of making you feel like you were there with him, and it's just it really hit home. not
And it can happen.
not sorry, not that I needed it or anything, but
Sure.
for anybody who does need it, they need to watch this. That's what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
Even if you're saved, watching this does me a lot of good, because it reminds you what the Lord has brought us out of, what was waiting for us, what we all deserve, and what we're being spared from. But the thing is, I was talking to somebody the other day about 9/11 and all the people that died that day. And you can say this about a lot of different things. But those people got up that morning and got ready and went to work, not knowing that they weren't going to see lunchtime, that they'd be dead by lunchtime. Now, I'm sure that quite a few of those people were saved and they went to heaven, but we know by the numbers that most of them were not. And so we do not know when our last breath will be. And so talk about gambling and rolling the dice. People, I guess, can blow this off and just say, well, I don't believe that place exists. And you're right to do that. You can do that but the evidence is heavy. Not only do you have these people, the eyewitness testimony, but you have the Bible describing exactly what these people are saying. So it's the price of that gamble is unbelievable. You'll never stop regretting, because he said this guy Tamara LaRue focuses on the hopelessness, and the Bill Weiss focused on the pain. This guy focused very much on the regret and the sorrow. And he said he knew he regretted it, and he just felt regret from the top to the bottom. And it was just, he knew he had the opportunities, and yet he failed. And he was always going to spend his eternity regretting and being sorrowful. And he said that, and I may have already mentioned this, but it's worth repeating, as he's going down and things were leaving him, things that he said we don't realize every single day that the Lord provides for even the lost, the ability to laugh, the ability to have even a little bit of hope, the ability to feel good. Bill Weiss said that rest, and so did Tamara LaRue, that the very idea of getting rest is a blessing from the Lord, because down there you have no rest. You're completely exhausted. This guy said that it was tremendous effort to even move your body. He said it was like you were made of lead. You couldn't even hardly move. So it's quite a gamble. And people that really, and others might say, well, you shouldn't get saved just to avoid hell. Well, it's a pretty good reason, because it really, the Lord talked about hell quite a bit and made it clear you don't want to go there, and he's the way not to go there. He's the way. And we're not talking about you have to start an orphanage. We're not saying you have to become Mother Teresa. You just have to have a relationship with the Lord, like we've said on this channel so many times, a relationship. What does that involve? Like Jeff said, repenting of your sins, inviting him into your life, and then you maintain that relationship in two ways. Pray into him as much as you can. Every day is nice. Reading the Bible as much as you can. A little bit every day is nice. And as long as you're doing those things, you're going to be set.
And if you start doing that, pretty soon a little bit turns into a lot. I start praying when I get up. I don't stop throughout the entire day. I don't pray continuously throughout the day, but just little prayers here and there. Just and every time I do, I feel that Holy Spirit right here. It's that swell that comes up in your chest, and you just feel it. And you know God's there with you. And then when I am going through something, I'll be sitting there regretting something or mad or sad or whatever, and all of a sudden that swell just comes in my chest, and I know He's there with me. I know He's there. Jesus, I asked Jesus to be with me, and that feeling comes, and He's there with me. So it's really very easy, and like Jerry said, you just start with a little bit each day, and pretty soon you're going to want more and more and more, and God makes it so easy. I cannot stress this enough how easy He makes it to have a relationship with Him. If you put forth the effort, even just that little bit, that's how I started out. 20 minutes each morning, 20 minutes praying, 20 minutes reading the Bible before I went to work. That's how I started out. And once it's almost like you can feel the joy from the Lord when you begin to take those steps and make that extra effort, because you can just tell the difference. And I've had people tell me since I started my walk a few years ago, that no, almost 4 years ago now. I mean, I was a Christian before that, but I didn't fall out of faith. I strayed, and then the Lord brought me back. And ever since He brought me back, people tell me certain things about me. They're like, you seem different. You don't, I hate to say this because it sounds so bad. It's like I've had several people, you don't cuss as much as you used to. And, I hate to say this too, but I had a former coworker ask me if I wanted to go grab a drink. And I smiled as I sent the text back. It's like, I don't drink anymore. So I, it's amazing what He does for you and what the difference in you can be. And I'm kind of getting off on another topic here, but just a little bit of effort every day, and He makes it so very easy. But one thing I wanted to say, probably my last point about the video, everything He describes in this video is on the outskirts of hell. He calls it the prelude to hell, because He's not even through the gates. So if all this atrocity, all this horror and terror and everything that's going on outside the gates, I don't even want to think about what's going on inside those gates. Because what I heard, it didn't traumatize me, but it definitely got my attention. And I don't even want to think what's on the other side of those gates.
Yeah, it's just the picture that he paints is a lot of people being butchered by hideous beings that can have their way and do whatever they want without any restraint whatsoever. And they are having an absolute field day. And like you said, that's on the outside. They're tearing people's limbs off. They're performing unbelievable atrocities, is the word you use, is pretty good, against these people. And that's all they have to do. And they're masters at it. And these things are just looking at them as hideous. And yet they're tearing these people apart. And he said that the people would actually, after they would be torn up, that they would regenerate, and the beings would be able to start all over again, to where this never really stops. It's unreal. But yet it's very real. And the people say that it feels more real than this dimension does. He said it's more real. And he was amazed that when he began to fall back after being shot, he felt like he fell into this dimension right away. It was almost like he said, I could have, if I'd have known, I could have reached out, put my hand into this dimension. It was that close. It's not like he fell from a mountain far away. He fell backwards into this dimension, and he was falling then, he said, and he could feel all those things we talked about, being stripped away, all the good things that the Lord gives, even the lost, even a gangbanger like him. The Lord gave him, joy, the ability to laugh, all these things he felt being peeled off. And he was just being left this desperate, destitute, horrified, frightened, sad individual and it was never going to improve ever for eternity. And he said, just the thought of that, he said, it's hard to even comprehend. And he said, you add the smell, just to smell what he said, that smell, it would kill any of us in this dimension. You can only handle it because you're in that dimension, and you revert to a different form, a spiritual being. But he said, just the smell, he said it would kill you if you smelled it right now on Earth. It was that bad. Unreal.
Yeah, it's crazy. Really, like not just crazy to think about, to imagine, to try to comprehend, which we can't. But you said atrocity is a pretty good word. I tried to think of the worst word I could think to describe that, and I still don't feel like atrocity
Right.
is good enough to describe what he talks about in this video. But it, like you said, a split second. The second we die, our eternity begins. It's like you said, it's not falling and we have time to prepare or anything. It's in that split second, in that moment that he was shot and died, his eternity began. Now, he was extremely, extremely, I don't want to say lucky, blessed. He was extremely blessed that the Lord pulled him out of that place because he still had use for him, because he wanted him to come back and tell his story. And it's amazing how many videos I've seen where people, they go to hell, they see it, and they come back, and we said we're on fire for the Lord, but these people, they're just fully engulfed by those flames, and
That's right.
they can't. I understand it, because I said, just listening to this video, I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy, but they're actually
Right.
were there and they can see it. So I could see the sense of urgency that they had. Ever since I began my walk a couple of years ago, 4 years ago, I've had this sense of urgency to try to reach the lost any way I can. And, they take it to a whole new level. So, um, that's all I had for this one. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we?
No.
All right.
No.
Well, it's a real simple choice. We've talked about it on this channel before. We have another video, actually. I'll put that link in the video in the description below to that video where we talked about another man going to hell. And he stresses in his story, which I want to stress here, that split second after you die, that's it. You start your eternity. Whether you start it with God in heaven, or whether you start it in pre-hell and going into hell like this gentleman did, is your choice. And the choice for me was easy. It's always been easy. God's always been there. I may have strayed, but he brought me right back. And it's always been real easy. But for some people, they need this. They need to see this video. They need to hear these testimonies. They need to hear the things that await them, because there are so many people walking around that are going to go to this place that he describes, to hell, and they're going to experience the things that he experienced there. And I mentioned it earlier, and I don't mind saying it again, that one simple choice, accepting Jesus as your Lord and Savior, will redeem you, and it will prevent you from going to hell. It's like Jerry said a minute ago, you don't want to get saved just to avoid going to hell, but it's a pretty good reason, especially when you hear an account like this. And you're not good enough on your own. There's people walking around that think that they can live a good life and they can do good things, and that's not enough. That's not enough. You have to have Jesus. The only way to God is through Jesus, and they make that abundantly clear. And it's one simple choice, one prayer, and then you just a little bit each day, and it gets easier and easier, and you want more and more. And that's all I had to say about that. That's my sales pitch, I guess. But I shouldn't make light of it, and I shouldn't make jokes, but it really is just one simple choice. And just, you don't have to, there's no formal way to pray. You just talk to the Lord. There's so many times throughout my day I just talk to Jesus. I just talk to him. I just tell him about my day. It's that simple. And I don't know any other way to stress it other than that. But the choice is yours. And Jerry, I'm gonna leave it at that. If you had anything else,
No.
all right.
That's it.
Well, we don't do this for the views or the likes or to get as many subscribers as possible. We certainly aren't trying to be internet famous or make any money off this channel. You'll never see a store selling t-shirts or anything on our channel. We just want to get the word out. Like this gentleman, we want to try to reach and warn the lost. We talk about things that we feel like God puts on us to talk about, and that's why we started the channel. I know we get out there sometimes with UFOs and cryptids and stuff, but we feel like it's all interconnected, and God puts it on us to talk about things that you won't hear in Sunday school or you won't hear during the sermon on Sundays. And it's just things that we felt like are important that need to be discussed and need to be out there. So that's why we started this channel. That's why we do this. And I'm gonna leave it there. Thanks for watching. Come on back to the next one. If you'd like to hit that subscribe button, that'd be great. We'd love to have you, but that's not why we do this. I mean, if we did get 1 million subscribers, that'd be great because we're getting the word out there, and that's all we want to do is just get the word out there. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you at the next episode. God bless.